and to provoke. The latest edition of official maps released by China for national and international consumption show Arunachal Pradesh, the Indian state, as Chinese territory. Not just that, Aksai Chin, Taiwan are also shown as parts of People's Republic of China. Using maps to rake up nationalistic sentiments within China has been a tried and tested strategy of the Chinese Communist Party. The fact that these maps have been released right before the G20 summit slated to happen in the national capital and right after the BRICS summit is clearly an indication from the Chinese. The stubborn resistance of the Chinese authorities to walk the talk, the much-known Chinese tactic of one step forward and two steps backward is well known across the world. But how would India deal with such a neighbor? With opposition training guns at the ruling government, will there be a real solution to the situation at the LAC? Will these bilateral differences emerge at the all-crucial G20 summit? Our focus on Viewpoint tonight.
बार बार ये प्रोवोक करते रहा कि अरुणाचल हमारा है, वो फलाना हमारा, ये हमारा, जिससे करके ये बोलते रहता। अभी तक हमारा बॉर्डर के बीच में भारत और चीन के बीच में बहुत वार्ता हुआ था, लेकिन कभी भी हाल नहीं होगा क्योंकि ये कभी नहीं होगा, क्योंकि चीन और भारत के बीच में कोई बॉर्डर नहीं है। बॉर्डर तब से बनाया, तब चीन ने तिब्बत को ऑक्युपाइड किया, कब्जा किया, तब से चीन और भारत का बीच में बॉर्डर बनाया। उसका पहला 1 इंच पे चीन और भारत का बीच में बॉर्डर नहीं पड़ता था।
प्रधानमंत्री ने देखना चाहिए। अभी ब्रिक्स में गए थे तो चाइना के प्रीमियर को मिलकर आए हैं, गले लगाए हैं हमेशा की तरह, और उसके बाद तो चाइना का मैप आता है। तो ये सवाल जो है उनको पूछना चाहिए, आपको कैसा लगता है?
Given the fact that the frontier in the western sector was undemarcated, these myths which the BJP keeps running, that Nehru gave up 38,000 square kilometers to China, is historically absolutely incorrect. Only an intellectually challenged person can make such a obnoxious claim. To sum it up, so therefore the Chinese maps are preposterous. They are not in sync with the history of the Sino-Indian border dispute.
Well, before we dip into the discussion, here's a piece of breaking news coming in. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has reacted to China's move, and he has said that putting out a map doesn't mean anything at all. Territories belong to India. That's something that he's clearly reiterated. That's the word coming in from none other than the External Affairs Minister of India. A very clear position that India has taken on this issue even earlier, when Arunachal Pradesh was shown as some kind of disputed territory or part of China. The Chinese authorities have been doing these things with their maps even earlier as well. India had stated a very clear position. Let me check if Abhishek Jha is with us on the broadcast to give us more details. But Dr. Jaishankar has hit back at China. He has made it abundantly clear that any kind of map issued by the Chinese authorities internationally and for India is meaningless. My colleague Abhishek Jha joining us on the broadcast, getting us more details on that story. Abhishek, a very clear assertion of stand by India. None other than the External Affairs Minister has spoken about it.
Of course, and yes, known as Jaishankar for his, very fair and frank remarks. And on the issue of China, he has clearly said that it looks like really absurd. And if a country, brings a map, keeping together the pieces and the territory of other countries, it can very well do that, but it would not change the reality. He's also said that India has seen such reports in the past also, and this is not the first time that China has made such an attempt. And we reject it outright. This is what Jaishankar has said on the issue of China's new map, which has included Aksai Chin, and also the parts of Arunachal Pradesh as extended part of southern Tibet.
Abhishek, going forward ahead of G20, what does this clear assertion of stand by the minister really mean? How does it translate?
You see, it wouldn't have been, nice, but Chinese have asked for it because ever since the Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping's candid conversation, it was being expected that there would be some sort of calmness or non-provocative attitude from the Chinese side, especially when the G20 is going to come. But it
Right.
doesn't look like China is very keen on having an improved and normal bilateral relationship because these kind of provocation and boundary disputes not being settled would not bring a new era of China-India relationship, and it will overshadow other dynamics of bilateral relationship as well.
Absolutely. It will overshadow those dynamics, and it's not the best thing that has happened, but as my colleague said, China asked for it, and it's a clear assertion coming in from India. Thank you, Abhishek, for joining us on the broadcast and getting us all the details and perspective on that statement of the External Affairs Minister. Dipping into this debate about what do these maps really mean, will they really overshadow the bilateral relations? It seems like that they would. More importantly, the tensions that have existed along the line of factual control ever since 2020, will they really escalate? There are various friction points where de-escalation is yet to happen. A complete withdrawal is the ideal, but that has not happened. And the manner in which the Chinese have conducted themselves, or they've not really walked the talk, is something that has concerned the Indian authorities. It's not just India, but territories like Tibet and Taiwan and various other neighbors of China have been at the receiving end when it comes to the expansionist policies of the CCP. Joining us on the broadcast is Dawa Sering, who's a Tibetan MP. We also have Tenpa Yarfel, who will be joining us in just some time from now. Both are from the Tibetan Parliament, the government in exile. Thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Dawa Sering, coming to you first, taking in a view from you. The manner in which Chinese have released their maps, it's not something that they have done for the first time, but it's clearly something that encroaches upon the sovereignty of various nations, including the Tibetan cause.
Yes. Okay, this is not the first time the Chinese were provocating the neighboring countries. Since the Chinese communists was incepted in 1949. Since that, the Chinese expansionist policy was started, and after that, in 1959, the Chinese has occupied the Tibet, forcefully occupied the Tibet. After that, even the Indian government had a agreement of Panchil. They betrayed the Indian and they made an aggression on 1962. We said China indeed bye-bye, but they betrayed to the Indians. So they have no. It is whatever the map released by the China or what they are claiming or provoking the Indian or other neighbors. They are totally condemnable and illegal. No right, no meaningful for that, because there was no any border between Indian and China before 1959. There's even an inches or even an inch as no border. So now after occupation of Tibet in 1959, then so-called Indian and China borders exist. Otherwise, there's no border at all. So there's no right for the China to claim such thing.
Absolutely. Mr. Sushant Sareen, I want you to open the debate and discussion for us tonight. The External Affairs Minister has spoken, and he has spoken in unambiguous words and terms, and he has said that these maps are meaningless, they mean nothing. A clear assertion by India, something that has been done earlier as well. But what are the Chinese trying to do? They have done it earlier, but the fact that it happened so close to G20, right after the BRICS summit, there was a statement as well that had come from both the sides. LAC tensions were spoken of. There was some hope that the bilateral relationships could be eased in the times to come. But with these maps, it doesn't seem like.
Yeah, it doesn't. I think what Dr. Jaishankar said is to the point. These are absurd claims. Not for the first time are the Chinese making these kind of claims. They keep making these claims.
Yeah.
But look, here is the thing. Cartographic aggression is part of what the Chinese lawfare is all about.
Sure.
Right? They do this and then they start, staking their claim, and then they go ahead and they start capturing or encroaching on territories. They've done it in South China Sea. They've done it in a number of other places. So I look at this, even though these are utterly ridiculous kind of claims from the Chinese side, I look at these as a kind of a statement of intention coming from the Chinese, which means that if indeed it is a statement of intention, which is backed by military capabilities which are already present along India's borders, then this is not something we should take lightly, which means that any hopes that anybody was harboring of that three-stage kind of a movement along the LAC, which was disengagement and then de-escalation and de-induction of troops, I don't think that's really on the anvil anytime soon. So fine, if that's the game the Chinese want to play, I don't see how we have any other choice but to play that same game.
Sure.
I don't think we are going to back down from whatever the Chinese are trying to do. And that is where matters stand. But at the same time, I think at the strategic level, if the Chinese intention is that, by trying to browbeat us, they will prevent India from doing many things on the international diplomatic front, including get close to the Americans, then I think what they are ultimately achieving is quite the opposite of what they are trying to do. And then, of course, Anushka, there is this whole issue of, India, this is a game two can play. And I think this is a game India should play. For example, we've already stopped talking about a one China policy.
Yeah.
So I think, as far as Tibet is concerned, in the maps which we bring out, we should show Tibet as in different colors
as an autonomous region.
From China's colors. We can play this game.
Yeah.
So if this is the game the Chinese want to play, I think we are pretty adept at playing the same game.
Well, you suggest that India should take a far more stronger view, and I mean, who knows, the Chinese may see it as an escalation of sort. We also have Keone Everington, who's the senior editor of Taiwan News, Jennifer Zeng, who's a member of the International Press Association and journalist at Inconvenient Truths, is also joining us on the broadcast. Keone Everington, coming to you first. When it comes to Taiwan, that particular region has been on the receiving end, and the entire conflict with the Chinese is very well known. In fact, last year we had also seen an escalation of sorts. This kind of aggression by the Chinese, or the assertion by the Chinese, do you think that the international community in some way can be successful in containing these efforts from the Chinese? Because so far it seems like that all the efforts have gone in vain. They have dug their heels, they have stuck to their stand, and they don't respect the sovereignty of other nations.
Well, talking about the map,
yes.
The presence of Taiwan in the map specifically,
yes.
Even the U.S. government struggles to be consistent with itself. And so even the U.S. government, when it comes to the State Department, the Pentagon, many government agencies also sometimes include Taiwan in the map. And that's what the Congress is working on right now to try and legislate, making that consistent that no, these are different countries. You must put Taiwan in as a different color or a different label. So even the U.S. government itself struggles to properly label Taiwan as a separate country on its own maps. So if the U.S. government can't do that, it's even worse when it comes to Hollywood and like products that are sold to consumers that show the map as Taiwan part of China, the average globe that you see, because so many of those things are made in China, right? And so it's a real struggle, and we're not even on. What needs to happen is there needs to be a much more united effort across the government and in the private sector to get on the same page and label, just starting with getting Taiwan as a separate entity on the map.
That's an interesting point. Yeah,
they're not doing what you're saying. They're not. Governments are not standing up enough to China, and they're sending mixed signals. And you can see that even though China is very belligerent to the U.S. in many ways, it's the U.S. that keeps sending envoys over, and that sends a bad signal, because it shows to the CCP that looks like weakness. It looks like their strategy is working. Their strategy of intimidation seems to be having the desired effect.
Seems to be. Why do you say that it's having the desired effect? I mean, if you were to substantiate that.
Right. So, because basically the U.S. is willing to make conciliation, make concessions, or appear to want to make concessions. And I think there was like an instance of what was it? It was some sort of.
No, I do get the larger point that you're making, because even on the Taiwan issue, as you pointed out from the US side as well, there has been a lot of back and forth, and they also wanted a de-escalation of sorts when the tensions were high. Jennifer Zheng, do you agree that the Chinese or the dragon has not been tamed? The international community, especially the US, wants this Chinese expansionist policy to be contained in some way. India is a strategic partner in that sense. But when it comes to, say, for example, an issue like Taiwan, on that even the American government has not been consistent. That's what many experts argue.
Yes, I think it is very important to understand why the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, wants to do this now and how the international world should respond. I think the CCP's this move is, for me, it's surprising, but of course it's not surprising. Not surprising is because from day one of the founding of the so-called communism, their ideology, their aspiration is so-called liberate the entire humanity. So, and the CCP has been expanding its whatever very aggressive foreign policy in all these years. But surprising is now because China is having extremely huge financial problems, social problems, economic problems. You would imagine for a normal thinking leader, they would try to focus on recover or to mend the economy first, instead of doing this kind of mending the map that will surely draw more, I think, negative, or I say response for the CCP. Why they would do it now? So another issue to pay attention is actually the logic under this is the serious or the worse the situation inside China is, the more possible that they would initiate some external issue to divert their attention and actually I think China
so you believe that the internal turmoil in China is so high right now that they are using these issues to divert attention, and in fact this was the same argument that was advanced by many people when the COVID crisis was at its peak, that to divert the attention or accountability. That's exactly what China is doing. Mr. Sushant Sureen, I'm coming back to you. And Mr. Dawa Sering is with us on the broadcast. You spoke of an interesting topic, say for example, Tibet or Taiwan. But do you really think that India can take a position that strong? For example, countries like US have not been able to be as consistent as they would like to be, say on an issue like Taiwan. Do you think India is able to afford that? Many critics argue, in fact the opposition parties here in India argue, that the government has not been as straightforward and direct in confronting the Chinese, at least on a foreign policy level or in the diplomatic arena, as they should have been. Do you think that criticism is well founded?
No, my question to that criticism would be, what would the opposition have us do? Declare war?
Yeah.
I mean, if the Chinese were trying to dare India and bring troops on the Indian borders, the Indian army and the Indian government responded with the necessary amount of force levels to stop the Chinese in their tracks. When it comes to Indian diplomacy, you've heard the foreign minister, external affairs minister speak very, very candidly, very, very openly, very bluntly on what he thinks of the Chinese, and why he is very clear that unless the Chinese back off, relations cannot go back to normalcy. Now, what else would the opposition want us to do? Personally, I think, yes, a lot of things which the Americans have not been able to do, for whatever reason they have not been able to do. Maybe there are Chinese lobbies which are buying out support in America. We've known this, that American academia is sold out to many Chinese interests. We've seen American politicians being sold out to Chinese interests. We've seen a whole lot of this stuff happening in American media, for that matter.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the reason, but in India, for example, I would not be surprised if India was to, because look at the way India has confronted the Chinese. Who else in the entire region has had scraps with the Chinese, physical scraps? Who else has had virtually a competition for territory where the Indians go and occupy certain strategic heights, and then the Chinese are forced to back down? Who else has done stuff like this, right? So if, for example, just as a tit for tat, it doesn't mean anything, drawing lines on the map, as Jaishankar says, that, you can draw as many lines as you want on the map, it means nothing. It doesn't change the reality on the ground. But yeah, if this is what the Chinese want
So
to give,
you believe, say, for the cause of Tibet, this is something that Indians can do. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, Anusha, don't we already publish our maps in which we show
Yeah.
Arunachal part of India? We
Yeah.
show the entire Aksai Chin as a part of India, right? And we've been doing that consistently for the last 75 years.
Yep.
Now, what else would the opposition want us to do? Or maybe they should tell us. Does the opposition actually think bringing out a white paper will solve everything between India and China? And if the government does indeed bring out a white paper, do you think the opposition will accept it and stop raising these very, puerile kind of points which they keep raising of how many 1,000 square kilometers of territory have been lost without specifying when thousands of kilometers were lost? So, that's politics, that will continue. But I think by and large, the Indian side is playing this game as good as it can be played.
I'll quickly take in a word from Mr. Dawa Sering, talk about the Tibetan cause and what the government in exile has been saying for a very long time. Mr. Sering, you think that the release of maps by, say, a country like India or any other nation which is sympathetic to the cause of Tibet and showing it as an autonomous region will help your, cause or the fight that the government in exile has been fighting for decades? Many argue that the Chinese occupation has, existed for far too long, and Tibet is a gone cause. But the government in exile continues to fight for it.
Yes, definitely. We are today. We are in a Jammu. Me and my colleagues are here on behalf of the Tibetan government in exile to make awareness, to get the support from the Indian people and the Indian government, and to thank the Indian government. The people have been very helpful for last 60 years in exile. So like what my before speaker said, the Chinese releasing such a kind of map is nothing. It's just on a paper. I mean, they have no right to claim anything like that because, as I told, the border is between the Tibet and China, and they have no right whatever they claim. And I just want to tell or request to the Indian government and people that now the Indians should, because the Chinese been provocating like such things for last 60 or 70 years. Now we should, the Indian is not today, 23, Indian is not like in 1962. Now we should politically, for the benefits of the Indian and for the Tibet, the Indian should stand more strong, politically stand for against the Chinese.
To what extent and how strongly can the Indians really take that position? Many argue that India has already taken a very strong position. I'm going to Keone Everington once again and Jennifer Zeng as well. Talking about the G20 summit, which is set to happen here in India. The bilateral ties between India and China and the difficult issue of the tensions along the LAC. Keone Everington, do you think, in your learned opinion, those tensions in some way can cloud the summit or in some way can have an implication on it?
I think, sorry.
Can I have Keone Everington and then I'll go to Jennifer Zeng.
Will these tensions, could you repeat the question? It's kind of breaking up. I couldn't hear the question.
I'm talking about the tensions that exist between India and China and the possible or the plausible effect, if at all, it could have on the G20 summit, the upcoming summit.
Sure. I mean, I think this is obviously a game being played by Beijing, and but I think it's not a very good move on the part of Beijing. I really think this was a blunder because it's only going to entail more hostility by India, and so I don't really understand why they did this. I mean, obviously, here in Taiwan, we're very used to this kind of thing, and it didn't really make waves here. But timing, I think, is really, really poor, and it could be, is it another case of one really aggressive part of the government doing this while the top leadership is not aware? I'm not really sure. I mean, because to me, it seems like something that would diminish, sabotage, and take away from attempts to establish better ties between the two countries and hurting the ties between the two countries. I'm not quite sure what benefit that has as far as this upcoming summit goes, other than, I suppose, trying to insert itself as more powerful and.
Yeah, and there was also much talk if there can be a joint statement, if that can happen, if there's a consensus on different issues that can come together. Jennifer Zeng, coming to you and seeing it from the point of view of India and that summit which is likely to happen. You interestingly spoke about the internal issues of China and why perhaps that's pushing the present regime in China to take such strong measures. The timing of the release of these maps, what does it indicate to you? And what is the message, say, for a country like India or for a region like Taiwan?
Actually, I think there is a great issue maybe many people have not realized yet inside China, which is under Xi Jinping's absolutely power. I think many lower level officials are now prefer not to do anything. Also, so Xi Jinping's decision now, I think many of his decisions now are out of touch with the reality. He may not really know what's happening in the real world. So maybe this is a policy that they've already decided or made long ago, but they don't do adjustment according to what is happening inside the world and inside China. So they release it no matter what. But the other danger is for me, if I were in China now, or I were a Chinese official, I would be very worried about the ever escalation in you can say conflicts with neighboring countries and with the worsening environment, international environment, and worsening domestic issues.
But Jennifer, it seems like that the Chinese are doing it on purpose because they've consistently done it. These are not episodes that have happened and gotten over. This is a consistent behavior by a government, by a country, and consistent behaviors tell you the nature of a particular being, in this case a particular country. Mr. Sushant Sareen, I want you to give the closing comments, the timing of it, the message for India, and what does it mean for the upcoming G20 summit.
So I wouldn't be surprised if there's absolutely no meeting between India and China during the G20 summit. And I think the Chinese will be responsible for that, simply because it's not just the G20. The statement which was issued by the Chinese Foreign Office was in bad taste after the BRICS summit. And very clearly there was no progress out there. And the meeting between the Prime Minister and the Chinese Emperor was basically, it was just kind of a pull aside. And I don't think there is any great mood in India to be seen to be engaging with the Chinese at the summit level at this point in time. I wouldn't be surprised if there is some kind of signaling from the Indian side. For example, if the Prime Minister was to go to the airport to receive President Biden, but a joint secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs was to go and receive Xi Jinping.
Sure.
I think it conveys, how the two stack up.
Yeah.
And the Chinese would, of course, will have a fire lit up in the wrong places of their anatomy, but so be it. So I think there are many things that can be done, as a kind of a signaling, and that is the direction in which things are headed. I don't think the Chinese are likely to understand the language that, we need to disengage, we need to have peace and tranquility. They'll keep mouthing those words, but I don't think they're not going to follow it up. And I think we need to be prepared for that. And I think Mr. Everington did mention something which is very important. We are Eastern societies. There are certain signals which go out, and what the Americans are doing, for example, with China, the constant sending delegations, trying to engage with the Chinese. The Chinese are not seeing that as Americans trying to engage in diplomacy to try and solve some of the, smoothen out some of the rough edges. They are seeing it as American weakness.
Absolutely.
And I think the Americans are so woke and so stupid at times that they are not realizing that the kind of signals they are sending are very negative signals and very counterproductive to what they are hoping to achieve.
Very
And they
candidly
are
said.
shooting
Yeah.
themselves in the foot by doing it. But America is an empire. Who can tell the empire what they should do? So
True,
it is
true.
one empire versus an emperor. I don't know how the world is going to unfold.
Interesting comments there by Mr. Sushant Sureen. Mr. Dava Sering, Sushant Sureen, Keone Everington, Jennifer Zeng, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. We'd have many more discussions like these in the days to come ahead of that very crucial summit, which is set to happen here in the national capital. Slipping into a very short break, up next on the other side, there are tremors in the alliance called I.N.D.I.A. as the Congress party's pitch for Rahul Gandhi as the prime ministerial face spreads unease among the allies. Will it be a deal breaker? Quite literally. That debate after a quick break.
Co-powered by
In future, maybe 50 years down the line, it can always show that okay, this land has never been a sovereign territory of India, and it was always a disputed land. So these disputes are, they are alive, and they are made to be alive always by the Chinese side in order to have a claim in the future. So this is what the Chinese statecraft has been, and this is what they are trying to do in Ladakh also, where they have kind of sat on position where the common petroleum points were, and now they would probably in few years down the line they would claim that these territory already belong to China, and now you can negotiate for the petroleum rights for the territories further from it. So this is how the Chinese nibbling theory of territory of other nations has been, and probably this time also with the latest map that China has released, they are trying to do that. But probably this is not going to go down well, and we can assume that there will be a reaction from the Indian side or the Ministry of External Affairs of the issue of China's latest map that shows Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh as part of its own territory.
Now, on Monday, China officially released the 2023 edition of its standard map, incorporating the disputed areas, including its claims over Arunachal Pradesh, Aksai Chin region, Taiwan, and the disputed South China Sea. India has repeatedly said that the state of Arunachal Pradesh has always been and will always be an integral part of the country. Now remember, this also follows recent attempts by China to rename India's Arunachal Pradesh, specifically particular areas within it. Now this is about a new map that China has also released, and we're also showing you the visuals of this new map that's been released by China, which is again talking about different territorial claims that China claims to have. But remember, this also comes in the backdrop of the fact that China has been trying to rename parts of Arunachal Pradesh, but India remains strong and firm on its stand with the fact that Arunachal Pradesh will be and always will be an integral part of the country. Now we're crossing over to CNN News 18's Foreign Affairs correspondent Abhishek Jha, who's joining us live to get us more details on this. Abhishek, tell us more about the fact that China's released this map. Tell us more about the areas that they've included in it. What exactly can our viewers understand from this new map?
So this is like an annual affair that Chinese ministry does, and they come out with certain territorial map of China so that they can have geographical exploration of those locations. But at the same time, these maps are always controversial because they do claim other sovereign territories of other nations as the part of Chinese mainland. Today, the map that we are discussing has been released yesterday on Monday by the Chinese government, and it clearly shows Arunachal Pradesh as part of China, Taiwan as an integral part of mainland China. It also shows 9-dash line in South China Sea as part of Chinese extended territorial territory in the sea, and that is something that is not going to go down well with the countries that Chinese territorial conflict has been. In South China Sea, we are going to see the disputed claims from the Vietnam, Philippines, Brunei, and Malaysia also, who have had claims over those territory that China is claiming its own now. We have seen Arunachal Pradesh has always been part of India, and Chinese claim on Arunachal Pradesh as an extended territory of South China, of South Tibet, has always been rebuffed by the External Affairs Ministry. In fact, recently also when China had released some villages and claimed that these villages, which has been developed and are part of the extended territory, that was that claim was refuted by India. Also, China had renamed certain places in Arunachal Pradesh, claiming that Arunachal Pradesh belongs to the Chinese side. It has been a practice, or you can say a statecraft of the Chinese side, that they always create a disputed territory along its border with other countries. It is the case with Japan also, where the Senkaku Island has been a disputed territory, and China has always claimed that island with the Chinese side. And probably this is the aggressive Chinese posture that has always been, a thing of concern wherever Chinese, territory is goes along with other countries.
Abhishek, now when it comes to this, can we also expect India to respond, or is it likely that this will be ignored?
There will be, of course, a response, but there has been always a standard reply that Chinese claims does not mean that these lands will belong to Chinese side, because de facto position is that there is a Indian government, there is Indian territory, there are religious people of Indian nationality living. The territorial claim and exploration of all the revenues are being deposited in the Indian treasury. So clearly, those territory belongs to India, no matter how much claims China does, and no matter how many villages China tries to change names of. But it also tells the kind of aggressive posting that China will continue to have on the issues of territorial claims in Arunachal Pradesh and Aksai Chin and other parts of other sides of its border. And this is a concern, because when you talk about rules-based order, when you talk about respect to sovereignty and territorial integrity of other nations, that clearly China.
Welcome back, and here's another big story of the day. Friction between the opposition parties that continues ahead of the crucial meet of the alliance parties and the alliance called I.N.D.I.A. The meeting is scheduled to happen in Mumbai. CNN News 18 has accessed the details of what will be on the agenda. This includes seat sharing, seat allocation, the logo of the alliance, and the Lok Sabha strategy, and also perhaps the prime ministerial face. Those are the key points of discussion. Well, the particular point about leadership or the prime ministerial face has become a point of contention. The Congress chief, Mallikarjun Kharge, so far has not made any categoric statement on that. But there are various chief ministers who have pitched for Rahul Gandhi as the prime ministerial face for the alliance. But there are allies like TMC, Aam Aadmi Party and the Uddhav faction of Shiv Sena who are part of the I.N.D.I.A. and have said that there is no question of Rahul Gandhi being the prime minister face as of now. Some say it in minced words, in muted tones, and some parties have given clear indications. The Congress allies maintain that several issues need to be ironed out before taking that crucial decision. JDU has even stated that Nitish Kumar has the credentials to become the next Prime Minister of the country, and he should be projected for the top post. Given the numbers, the Congress party remains the fulcrum of any united opposition project. But given the dismal electoral record of Rahul Gandhi, will his projection as the Prime Minister's face be a deal breaker? Moreover, is the Congress party ignoring the prime ministerial ambitions of the other regional satraps? Will that come in the way? Our focus on Viewpoint.
(2024) में हमारा गठबंधन जीते, ये हमारे लिए बड़ी चीज है। पद या प्रधानमंत्री पद हमारे लिए महत्वपूर्ण नहीं है।
प्राइम मिनिस्टर की दौड़ लगाने की इस वक्त कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है। सबको इकट्ठे होकर के लड़ाई लड़नी है और वो माहौल बना हुआ है।
जुगाड़ का जमघट है, वो जनादेश के पनघट तक नहीं पहुंचाता। ये बात वो लोग भी जानते हैं जो सांप सीढ़ी के खेल में लगे हुए हैं, क्योंकि नरेंद्र मोदी जी के काम की गिनती ने इस कुनबे का गणित बिगाड़ दिया है।
All right, let me take this question about, will the I.N.D.I.A. alliance really succeed in delivering a tough challenge to the BJP ahead of 2024? What are the key questions? What are the key challenges? And how much of the criticism of this alliance by the BJP or by various other political observers and analysts really hold? Joining us on the broadcast is Charu Pragya. She's the spokesperson of the BJP. Ashpreet Singh Kadial from the Congress Party, the spokesperson. Mr. Krishna Hegre, who's from Shiv Sena, the Shinde faction. We're also joined by Mr. Ghanshyam Tiwari, who's the spokesperson of the Samajwadi Party. Good evening to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Ashpreet, why don't you open the debate for us? Rahul Gandhi as the Prime Minister. A lot of senior Congress leaders have spoken about it. Many chief ministers have spoken about it. I know it's not the official quote-unquote position of the Congress Party and not a suggestion on the table when it comes to that alliance. But this has been said far too often in Indian politics and its political discourse, and it seems like a lot of regional satraps are not so happy. How do you see the suggestion that Nitish Kumar should be the Prime Minister's face?
Thank you very much for the question. See, had this question been posed to the Bharatiya Janata Party, they would have been able to answer your question as to who's going to be the Prime Ministerial face, because a single man calls all the shots in the Bharatiya Janata Party. Unlike that, we have a democratic setup. All our leaders collectively decide, and then we reach upon to a decision. Now, the fact of the matter is that the Bharatiya Janata Party seems very rattled with the unity amongst the opposition. First, there happened to be 16 political parties the first time the meeting happened in Patna, Bihar. And by the time the second meeting happened, there were 26 plus political parties that had joined us. And out of those 10 that had recently joined us, 2 of them happened to be former BJP allies. And the Bharatiya Janata Party's proof of nervousness, of anxiety was that simultaneously they conducted a meeting of their own. And because the Bharatiya Janata Party was concerned with the, with the issue that we should also do something about it. We have already lost Karnataka, we have already lost Himachal, we are going to be losing 2024. So the leaders started making statements like, if you're having to make an alliance, that means it's a sign of your weakness. That means you cannot win. Now, I want to ask Charu this question. If that's the logic of the Bharatiya Janata Party, then why do you have an alliance of your own in the N.D.A. of so many parties? If you think it's a sign of weakness, having an alliance, then break an alliance.
As a moderator of this debate, as an anchor, I don't think that forming an alliance is a show of any kind of weakness.
Exactly.
But the question, Charu, I'll just come to you. Just let me take one interjection more from Ashpreet. But the question is rather in the details. What is the basis on which an alliance is formed? What are the tangibles which are deliverables from a key alliance? And what are the moot questions on which there is a consensus between the alliance partners? And if these 3 or 4 key paradigms of an alliance are not answered, it's on a flimsy ground. So everybody is questioning the flimsy ground on which an alliance stands, not the sheer nature that there is an alliance that exists and it's a sign of weakness. I think that's a distortion of argument.
I think if anyone has a flimsy ground for an alliance, that's the Bharatiya Janata Party. Because you remember, after their meeting was done, simultaneous meeting that happened, that took place, there were leaders that came out of the meeting and said that there was nothing productive discussed in the meeting of N.D.A. There was only praises showered upon Mr. Modi. No roadmap at all whatsoever for the future. Number 2, you asked us a question as to why and on what basis have you all come together. Now, let me tell you one thing. The basis is very clear. The Bharatiya Janata Party has become a danger for the country and for our democracy. Therefore, everybody, all the opposition parties and everybody in the country had to come together in order to defeat the Bharatiya Janata Party and their agendas to turn this democracy into dictatorship. Number 3, you said, what is the commonality that you have? What do you offer? We offer a vision. We offer a plan for the country, a developmental agenda. Unlike the Bharatiya Janata Party, we won't give inflation, unemployment, a bad Medicare. Then you talk of the diesel, you talk of the petrol, you talk of the gas, you talk of the dal, you talk of the paneer, you talk of the doodh, talk of anything. The prices have, are touching the sky. And the Bharatiya Janata Party, instead of doing anything, has only been campaigning. Now, I want to ask Charu Pragya one question. Charu, just answer this question. Even the anchor said it very clearly, that having an alliance is not a sign of your weakness. But if our leaders have said it, that it's a sign of weakness, then why do you have an alliance of your own? And number 2, the house of cards that the Bharatiya Janata Party had built on the basis of lies, on the basis of false promises, has already started to crumble. We have seen a very good example of that in 2 states.
All right. Let Charu answer now. And House of Cards, that argument I believe is a double-edged sword. It can turn either way. Janta Janardhan decides. But Charu, go ahead. Make your argument.
Thank you very much. So reminding Ashpreet that the UPA government in 2009 was made out of 20 parties coming together. And let me also remind you that 2019 elections, which the NDA won and it became Modi term 2, the alliance was of 21 political parties. So forming an alliance is what happens in democracies, and it is quite sad that you need to look down upon that. That being said, NDA is still as strong today as it was 10 years ago. I can't say the same for the UPA alliance that has been rechristened. See, you can't change your insides by just getting a plastic surgery done on the outside. And UPA rechristened the ... alliance is not changing that. You wanted to actually talk about how much amazing achievements the I.N.D.A. alliance has had in the last 2 meetings. After the first meeting, there was a fallout, and you were already at each other's throats. Now, Aam Aadmi Party wants to contest in Chhattisgarh, wants to contest in Bihar. In Punjab, there are dharnas against the Aam Aadmi Party Sarkar in Bengal. It's your party which sits in dharna against Mamta Didi. Now, all these we can discuss in great detail and go on, but let's leave it. But after your I.N.D.A. alliance was formed, the NCP split, the Delhi Ordinance Bill came around. All of a sudden, we have this new flurry of PM faces emerging from your side. Tell me if I'm wrong. Now, continuing with this, let me also give you some facts. And these facts are very important for our viewers also, Anusha. Please hear me. Now, in 2019 elections, Bharatiya Janata Party alone contested on 437 seats and we won 303 out of it. Look at that success rate. While the Congress party, which is supposedly heading this ... alliance, contested on 421 seats and won merely 52. Merely 52. So you look at how much support the government is giving. That being said, let's also, because we have my friend Ghansham on the show with us today, remind him that when BSP and SP contested together in Uttar Pradesh in the same election, which was called the Mahagathbandhan, out of the 80 seats, we still managed to win 70. 70 was BJP plus its alliance. So look at how people have gone completely on one side. Now, Chandrababu Naidu worked very hard in 2019, Anusha. He got together 20 plus parties. We thought 2019 election is going to see some magic for the opposition, but the result is for everyone to see.
Well, the BJP has been part of, the Congress has been part of successful alliances and government that has run this country, delivered well for the economy. So, I believe on alliances, the stories exist on both the sides. I'll maintain my point that the argument is on the grounds on which an alliance has been formed.
Yes.
And the grounds, and one point, Charu, I want you to specifically respond to before I bring in Mr. Ghansham Tiwari and Krishna Hegde into the discussion. One point is repeatedly made by the opposition parties that why is the BJP so hung up on a face? We'll decide on the face once the elections are close. We are fighting an election which is an issue-based election. And the face per se may be very important for the BJP, but it's not so important for the I.N.D.I.A. alliance.
So that's fine. You can take your time, choose your PM face, but it does cause a confusion amongst the voters when every single person considers themselves to be the face of this alliance. That being said, that's a later discussion. First, you need to get requisite number of seats to discuss a face. How are you managing the seat share? Anusha, also I wanted to point out one thing. Now, when the opposition says they are uniting over a cause, I don't see any cause apart from defeating Prime Minister Modi, and that's not good enough for the people of this country.
All right, let me bring in Mr. Krishna Hegde and Ghansham Tiwari also into the discussion. Mr. Tiwari, there were a few points that Charu made, which is a reminder for the SP as to why certain alliances don't work. But my question to you is very similar to what I asked the Congress party, that is there really a real understanding? And the ambitions of Akhilesh Yadav or various other tall leaders who are regional satraps within the alliance are very well known. I ask you a straight question. Rahul Gandhi, Nitish Kumar, are these acceptable faces for the Samajwadi Party to pitch as the next prime ministerial candidate for this alliance?
Good evening, Anusha, to you, my fellow co-panelists and the viewers. Three things are important here. One is that on one end, we have BJP that is today by hate and propaganda, for hate and propaganda, and of hate and propaganda, from school children to hate against women to hate against the word India, so that news channels and BJP spokesperson have started fracturing the word India into calling it I.N.D.I.A. People who grew up calling India as India today come on television and say I.N.D.I.A. So this is an example of hate that BJP has built into the country. On the other hand, there is an agenda of employment for the youth, agenda of harmony, agenda of ensuring that price
You are the one who fragmented India into I.N.D.I. We didn't do that.
Let him make his comment. Let him make his comment. I'll come to you. I'll give you the chance to respond. Mr. Ghanshyam Tiwari, finish your argument.
I did not interrupt. We saw
Nobody's
the visuals of
Please go ahead. Yeah.
We saw the visuals of Prime Minister of India standing like in front of the Chinese president, who was sitting as if Chinese president was the headmaster. This is the Lalank. India has been taken to a fool's paradise by this government, who has betrayed the people, helped Adani and a few businessmen, and has ensured that people continue to fight, whether it is in schools, whether it is in Manipur, whether it is in Noon, whether it is in any part of India.
But Mr. Ghanshyam Tiwari, whatever has been said about the BJP or the alliance or other things, I think Charu can respond. But I have one question to ask you. This is not about a particular prime minister, political leader, but these small clips doing rounds on social media, trying to mock a particular personality. I hope we realize that when those spot shots are taken and when the opposition picks up on it and makes a so-called informed judgment on it, you're also somewhere belittling your own country. It's a global platform on which any prime minister, it can be from the Congress, from Samajwadi Party or the BJP, goes and represents your country. I mean, is it really fair to say, based on that particular clip, that your country was belittled?
I think for 9 years, the country has been belittled when national media has played everyday Hindu-Muslim debates, including channels, Hindi channels of News 8 in India itself. That is belittling the country. That is seeding the poison in every household and not apologizing when Supreme Court calls out for hate speech. When people are struggling for jobs and against price rise, news channels play the government propaganda of hate.
It's quite convenient. Mr. Ghanshyam Tiwari, you have every democratic right to make an argument here and say whatever you want to. But if I start digging into the statements that were made by various leaders of the Samajwadi Party, including the people who founded this party, and what they have said on various social issues, including women, I'm sure that will also qualify as a hate speech. But that's not the issue that we are discussing right now. I want to bring in Mr. Krishna Hegde also into the discussion. Mr. Hegde, talking about the leadership. Charu, I'll come back to you. Let Mr. Hegde make his opening comment. I'll come back to you. Mr. Krishna Hegde, you've been listening to the discussion. A lot of questions about the leadership of who's going to lead this particular alliance. Do you see this particular alliance deciding on a face in the run-up to 2024, or they would want this question to be answered as and when, if at all possible, before elections?
Anusha, first let me tell you that you have mentioned me as the Shinde faction.
Ji.
We are not the Shinde faction, we are the Shiv Sena, and we have been established in 1966.
I take your point, sir. Yeah.
And Honorable Eknath Shinde ji is the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, and we have 13 Member of Parliaments in the House.
So Mr. Krishna Hegde from the Shiv Sena. Please go ahead and make your argument, sir.
So I would be happy if you could correct that first. Secondly, I would like to say, till 1 week ago, the Congress and the AAP were fighting for who will fight the Member of Parliament seats in Delhi. Before that, they were fighting on the ordinance issue. The Congress does not get along with the BRS, they do not get along with the AAP, they do not get along with the TMC, they do not get along with the JDU, they do not get along with the BJD, they don't get along with the Bahujan Samaj Party, they don't get along with the JDS, okay, to start with. So how can you call them coming back to one phase? They can't have one phase. You ask our 36, 38 parties, who's your leader, who's the Prime Minister candidate, and unanimously we will say Honorable Shri Narendra Modi ji. You ask them who's your convener, they will throw up 5 names. So this coalition not going to work.
But Mr. Hegde, the opposition argues that this is not your strength or your asset. This is rather a problem because there is no internal democracy in the camp of the BJP. That's what they argue.
Anusha, in the last, in 2014, the Congress got 40 odd seats. In 2019, they got 50 odd seats. Together in 2 Lok Sabha elections, they have not gathered 100 seats. And over that, Harshdeep, my friend, was saying that we were talking about Medicare. What is the Congress known for in 2014? It was known for 2G, 3G, Commonwealth, Adarsh, Koila, submarine, helicopter and all these ghotalas.
Ashpreet, I'll come to you. I'll give you the time to respond. One at a time.
And never got them back. And they won't get them back again. So the Congress is riding they can change their name from UPA to India or whatever. But if you call a tortoise a horse and say now run like a horse, that tortoise is not going to run like a horse. So they should know that very clearly.
I'm sure the Congress and the Samajwadi Party would want to respond to that.
The
But Charu
earlier-
Pragya first, a quick response from
the
Charu
name
Pragya.
was
Yeah, thank you very much. Anusha, also the opposition likes to paint that the country has not achieved tremendously in the last 9 to 10 years. They forget that today we are a country where there is Har Ghar Jal. Did they ever even think about working on that? Simple things like women having toilets in their own homes. Congress never cared. Arshpreet mentioned healthcare. Ayushman Bharat today is it's become a work for case studies, and they conveniently forget all that. There are a grid of highways which are connecting even the smaller cities. In fact, Arshpreet ke party ke primary logo ke constituencies are not connected by decent roads. So let's not pretend that BJP's achievements have not been incredible on ground. Prime Minister Modi's rating continues to rise, as does the rating of our country.
And as I bring in Arshpreet to respond, Arshpreet, today there was a 200 rupee cut on the LPG cylinder prices as well. And BJP somewhere and the government somewhere is arguing, look, this is our effort to contain inflation.
Thank you for the question. You see, it's very clear that the Bharatiya Janata Party. Thank you. The Bharatiya Janata Party is in the habit of, taking out money from your upper pocket and then putting it in your lower pocket. They say, एक चीज का दाम हमने कम कर दिया, लेकिन 10 other things, their prices have inflated. They are touching the sky today. I've already given the examples in the very first segment. Dool, dahi, dal, paneer, you talk of lal cylinder, you talk of, tomatoes, you talk of vegetables, you talk of fruits, you talk of anything you want. Number two.
One at a time. Charu, I'll come to you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. So
I'll
all
come
we
to
are
you,
saying
Charu. I'll come to you. Yeah.
Now kindly give me 60 seconds uninterrupted. Number one.
Yeah.
The Bharatiya Janata Party has been time and again asking questions about who's going to be the PM face, who's going to be the PM face. We understand that we're rattled, but we happen to be living in a parliamentary form of government, not a presidential form of government. Understand that. Number two. The Bharatiya Janata Party, we understand a single man calls all the shots in a party and then it's imposed upon all the leaders. Your question who's going to be the face and when is going to be the face declared, that will be decided by our opposition unity. What do you have to do with it? You please take care of the business.
No, but Arshpreet, it's all very well said. It's all very well said that, we'll decide, we'll come to a consensus. Great. I mean, that's great spirit. But is that just an attempt to duck a very important question? Any formidable alliance would rather decide on the leadership first and then go to the bare components of it. You are doing it exactly the opposite way.
I'm sorry. I beg to differ. Now, I do realize that the Bharatiya Janata Party thinks. Now, Charu was also saying there is dissent. She said you are fighting. All the opposition parties are fighting. I understand why they see dissent as fighting, dissent as unconstitutional, because the Bharatiya Janata Party is not used to it. The Bharatiya Janata Party thinks. Now, please do not interrupt.
30 seconds to you, Arshpreet. Then I'll go to the BJP. 30 seconds.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll have to interrupt Charu if she interrupts me, please.
No, she's not interrupting you. Nobody is being allowed to interrupt you. 30 seconds.
I want to say one thing, that the BJP is very uncomfortable with dissent. We are not. We think dissenting, deciding, and discussing are three very important factors of democracy, and the Bharatiya Janata Party will soon understand that once they're ousted in 2024.
Okay, Charu Pragya.
Number
30 seconds are over. I'm sorry.
Just the last point. Point. See, another simultaneous meeting is going to be happening in Mumbai of the BJP, Shiv Sena, etc., the leaders. Now there is another simultaneous meeting happening. Now this goes on to suggest that the Bharatiya Janata Party is nervous. And one thing, she said Ayushman Bharat.
There is no way to prove whether they are nervous or not. They say you are nervous, you are saying they are nervous. I don't think that's a good argument or a substantial argument to make. But Charu Pragya, 60 seconds to you for a quick response. Yes, please go ahead.
Funds have been halted.
Let her make a point now. You've made your point. Charu Pragya.
Thank you very much. So, Arshpreet, it is not Charu Pragya who's saying the leaders of the so-called alliance are fighting amongst each other. A Congress leader says that Congress is contesting all 7
Manipur and Haryana. Have you forgotten that?
Let me finish. No, Arshpreet.
Let her make her argument, please. No, I won't allow one guest to interrupt another one in this way. I didn't allow you to be interrupted. Charu Pragya, please. Yes.
Thank you. Congress wants to supposedly contest all 7 seats in Delhi. Then from Chhattisgarh, a minister visits Delhi and says, oh, look at the situation in Delhi. Aam Aadmi Party is not doing well. Then Aam Aadmi Party declares that Chhattisgarh we are contesting by ourselves. Forget that. We'll also contest in Rajasthan and in Bihar. And then after that, you have the Congress Party sitting in on a dharna against Mamata Banerjee and giving statements against her. So please, let's not pretend that this friendship, this alliance or whatever it is rock solid. It's not. It's a house of cards, and you are the ones whose leaders are giving these statements. I'm merely repeating it. Don't shoot the messenger here. If you're talking about inflation, Arshpreet, I was asking you, what is the inflation in other countries of the world? Forget about the very badly...
I have last 30 seconds on the show. Mr. Ghanshyam Tewari, I reiterate the question to you that I said at the beginning. Rahul Gandhi, Nitish Kumar, these are two faces that have been pitched for the prime ministerial phase from the alliance called I.N.D.I.A. Will they be acceptable to Samajwadi Party? You didn't answer that question when I asked you earlier, so I'm reiterating that.
Question is for people to decide. 2 quick points. BJP's alliance is today like a tukde gang. There's a tukda from Shiv Sena that cannot stand on its own. When they formed the government, the slogans were 50 khoke, ekdam okay. There is tukda from LJP, there's tukda from some other party. And these tukdas have been brought together on the pressure of ED, CBI, corruption money and whatnot. So this tukde gang wants to take on India alliance.
I wish I had got a direct answer on that, but I appreciate the time. Thank you all for joining us on the broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Time will tell if there is a leadership phase that can emerge as far as this particular alliance is concerned. A very crucial meeting lined up in the next few days. Well, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Viewpoint. Plain Speak follows with Shivani Gupta. Thank you for watching.
Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. The big LPG rate cut has happened. Union Cabinet today announced that the price of the 14 kilograms LPG cylinder will be reduced by 200 rupees for all users. News18.com was the first to report that this is coming almost 2 weeks back. And this is the step that was most key for the central government because the price of the non-subsidized LPG cylinder had risen to 1100 rupees. The last time